Hi guys, welcome to Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie. Today's episode is a continuation from last week where we take the 5 apology languages quiz live on the show. This is a great episode to watch on YouTube or on Spotify so you can easily follow along with the quiz. We're going to get right back into it, but before we do, Georgianna will lead us through a body-based self-connection practice. Take it away, G.
All right, so this practice, we're going to practice collecting some evidence because we're very good evidence collectors. And usually we're very good at collecting evidence that things suck or life is hard. So we're going to practice doing a little bit of the opposite. So notice what body connection feels good for you right now. For me, I'm just giving my thighs a squeeze. And notice your breath. I want you to look around your space and find some evidence that life is good or you have a good life or things are good for you right now. For me, I'm looking at this little drawing that my kids made for me when my ex-husband and I split and I moved into a different house, and they drew me a little heart, and it's colored in like 5-year-olds and 3-year-olds would color. So I want you to look at the thing that is evidence for you that you have a good life, and look at that thing and feel your butt on the chair or your feet on the ground. And I want you to turn to a different part of your space and find another thing that is evidence that you have a good life and that things are good. This doesn't mean that you have nothing hard going on in your life. This just means that this one element reminds you that there are some things that are okay or decent or good in your life. I'm looking at the mountains. And this time, look at this thing. Feel what your hands are touching. And then we'll turn to a different area of our space and do the same thing. We're going to look for one more thing in your space that gives you evidence that there's something good in your life. This time, have a look and notice your breath. And there you go. We just practice collecting evidence in a way that reminds us of what is good.
What's good? I love it. Okay, on that note, let's get back into it. I could imagine for some people at some stage of their journey that having the right and being told they have the right, like it's almost being told that you're allowed to be mad, you know?
Yeah.
And that sort of feels good to me.
For sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think like that would be really nice to hear. You have every right. It makes sense for you to feel really mad at me, right? Or really upset.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that stems from the fact that for many of us, we weren't validated. We weren't given space to feel those feelings when we were younger. So when someone says like that your feelings make sense or you have a right to them, you're allowed to have them, that's going to feel really good. At least for me, that feels really good.
Yeah. For me, if these two were combined, like you've got every right to be upset. I totally messed up. I could make excuses, but I don't have any good excuses. I would like you to understand my thought process. Like there's something in there about, I think a lot of the time sometimes people are just making excuses for themselves for their behavior they know was wrong. But I think a lot of the time what appears to be excuses is people trying to explain why they did what they did, you know?
Yes.
And to make that intellectual connection.
I think this is a really good discerning point because I think we've all been in a situation where someone has done something and it's felt like a rupture, and then they give excuses or whatever we want to call that. And there's an energy of where it feels like someone's trying to give an excuse. And then there's a different energy where someone is wanting to share with you their thought process, which you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to understand someone's thought process. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
helpful, right? To know, like, how do they come to this place? And
Mm-hmm.
often I think the beauty in it is we start seeing that people had good intentions. And I think it's important to spend more time seeing that people have good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
Might not have been helpful, but you can be saying the same words, but if it comes from a place of I'm making excuses for myself, it's going to feel very different.
Yeah, totally. I think even from this perspective, using the word apology is even confusing. Like, really, what we're talking about is making repairs.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
thinking about two things. So, the housemate who doesn't typically say the words "I'm sorry" but makes amends. For me,
Mhm.
those need to come together to be meaningful. So, I thought that the words "I'm sorry" were important to me,
Right.
but it's not that. It's the impact and the understanding really is what it is.
Right.
So an example I have is yesterday, my mom called me
Mm.
and she had been listening to a past episode where I had said that in my family dynamic, I need to be entertaining. Like they've literally said, you're the entertainment kind of thing.
Right.
And so she wasn't apologizing. She wasn't taking responsibility for this, but she was recognizing that would be a burdensome thing to feel. And she didn't want me to feel that way. So she didn't
Right.
say, oh gosh, I'm sorry you ever felt that way. And we never intended that. She just said, well, it's not that we think you need to be entertaining. We think you are entertaining and we enjoy that. And we love you, even if you're a lump on the couch, not
Mhm.
doing anything. And I didn't want you to continue believing that thing that doesn't need to be true and might be a burdensome feeling for you. And that
Right.
feels just like tremendous repair and a relief
Mhm.
that I think in this context would be classified as an apology in some way, but it isn't really an apology. It's a repair.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, if we really get into semantics, like for me, an apology is like some words. Um, I'm sorry. I think that's the closest thing that I've connected with an apology.
Or
And
regret, some kind of
yeah,
internal
but
shame feeling.
as we see through this discussion, like those feel insufficient to me and they feel insufficient to you,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and it's a weird
Um,
thing when someone says like, "Oh," I can think of an instance with my housemate where she got spray paint on something, and I was like, what the hell? Like you didn't even apologize for that. She's like, I didn't realize that was something I needed to apologize for.
mm,
And if we're taking different meanings of the term
mm,
apologize, then, we're going to be speaking totally different languages.
right. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Mm,
Hmm. Um, and I think that's why we're doing this episode, because I think it's important to get clear for ourselves what we need so that we can let the people we care about know what we need,
yeah,
because they might not need the same thing and might assume that that's not a necessary thing.
yeah.
Um
Okay.
let's see. Where am I at here? I totally messed up. I could make excuses, but really I have no good excuse for my actions. I think I really liked what you did with the combining the two.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, if I have to pick one, I would pick the first one. And
mhm.
before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of holding things against each other.
Ooh, yucky.
It reminds me of scorekeeping, which
Mm,
feels gross to me. Um, and like when we were talking at the beginning of this episode about repairs and then feeling clean and complete afterwards, to me, if I'm holding something against someone or they are holding against me, that will never feel clean and complete.
yeah,
It will always feel like that's this thing in between us.
yeah.
And I wonder if like holding things against someone, like what that stirs up for me is it's a way of protecting ourselves.
Hmm.
It's a way of like realizing, oh, I've been hurt by this person who I care about deeply. And if I just hold this against them, it's like a little armor or shield. I don't
Yeah,
have to let them come that close to me anymore
yeah.
because there's this thing in between us. And hopefully I won't hurt that much next time if this happens again.
Oof.
And what a sad way to try to protect ourselves. But then lose out on deeper connection.
Yeah. That's making me think of when there's been infidelity in a relationship and people are talking about rebuilding trust. And
Yeah.
usually that's this really defended thing where someone needs to prove that they're trustworthy, and we're saying, well, I'm choosing to trust them, but quietly in my mind I'm holding something against them, and I'm hoping they'll be able to remove it, but for now I'm holding this buffer between us. And
Yeah. And I think that if we don't choose to lay that down, there's nothing someone can do that can remove that.
yeah, totally.
Right? If we're adamant about holding it against someone, and I get feeling really hurt and like feeling betrayed by someone in that kind of situation, but I do feel that there's really nothing someone can do if we choose to still keep that between us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, and when people are learning to trust again, they're not typically looking for evidence of trustworthiness. They're looking for evidence that the person still can't be trusted. And you're going to find whatever evidence you're looking for every time you look for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let's see.
Number
Top
one.
one. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next one. It's more meaningful to me when someone asks me,
I'd like to make things better between us. What can I do to make things right?
Or, you don't have to answer immediately, but will you consider forgiving me for making this mistake?
no. It's funny because obviously at this point, how many 5 questions in, 6 questions in, you get a sense of what is not my language of apology. But it does make me curious, like, who says yes to this one all the time, right? And like what their past experience with apologies has been for them to find this one really appealing. And this is the other thing, like these are my immediate responses based on my experiences, significant, like pretty much in childhood, that have shaped me into the type of apology I want and feel that I need. And we're all different. We've all had a different trajectory to get to this place today. And so if you find that the things that I think are horrible are things you would love, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It just means we're all different and we need something different.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely you're getting a sense of what it does not fly for me.
The second one for me feels like it would have been appealing when my relationships were dramatic and unpleasant. So like I would have misread this. I can now see I was misconstruing the words. Like, you don't have to answer immediately. It's like, oh, they're giving me space to think and feel my way through this. So check for that. And will you consider forgiving me for making this mistake? There's not even really an apology in there. It's, will you consider forgiving me is different than I'm sorry, That's totally different
Yes.
meaning. But I would have been like, oh, they know they made a mistake. They're asking me to consider, like, this is my choice then to move forward. But there's no responsibility. And I imagine that the first option would have looked a bit boring and dry. And now that's what feels appealing to me. And the second dramatic option feels disgusting.
Yeah, I love that you point that out because I can really see that. The first one does seem sort of boring and dry. I'd like to make things better between us. What can I do to make things right? But like that one sounds totally hot to me.
Yeah, balance. Yeah.
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 Yes, because of the accountability and the ownership and the action, you know?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
forthright.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second one feels like a bunch of dodges too. Like it feels like it has like a dramatic roller coaster trajectory even in the sentence. It's one sentence. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I also, the first one, I really like this sentence. I'd like to make things better between us. Um, I always like to hear someone's intention for
Mm.
us,
Mm-hmm.
and to hear someone say, I'd like for things to feel good between us again, right? I'd like us both to feel connected again. What can I do to help with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like intention, and then like intentional action towards that desired state. Like that's like music to my ears.
Yeah. Totally. So number one then, huh?
Mm-hmm. I talk to a lot of people who they ask me, what should I say to my partner? What should I say? And um one of the big things we talk about is, are you willing to share your intention? Like, what would you like for the two of you?
Mm.
And it's always very clear. People know immediately what they want for the two of them. And they don't have to make this up. They don't have to think too hard.
Mm.
And I'm like, how about share that? Like, oh, okay. And like, I really highly doubt that ever lands poorly.
Mm.
When it's said in a real genuine way and people can feel that you're genuine about what you want with them,
Mm.
right? They're either going to say like, yeah, I want that too, or like, thank you for sharing that that's what you want. I maybe want something different. But I think that people are going to be able to feel your sincerity
Mm.
and appreciate that you're sharing a desire.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Okay, so number one. Okay, next one. It's more meaningful to me when I hear these words from someone.
I want to ask you to forgive me. That's a weird. Okay. Um, and it deeply pains me to see you hurting like this.
That's the one I want to hear people say, and I want them to say it like that.
I'm so deeply pained. Your pain pains me deeply.
um, I think like I'm not sure if I care too much that it deeply pains that person.
Mm.
Um, but I think what I like about this second one is that they see that it's hurting me,
Mm. Yeah,
right? If
totally.
they were to say, I see that this is hurting you, I'm sorry, that was not my intention, like, how can I make this better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are both rough for me. Let's do a real live thing here and see what your response is. G,
Okay.
I want to ask you to forgive me.
No, I don't care what you want to ask me for.
I'm like, well, are you gonna ask or do you just want
Yeah.
to ask? Is this an idea you're rolling around in your head? I immediately get a bit shirty about it.
Yeah, for me it doesn't have enough assertiveness, like forthrightness or something. And again, this forgiveness thing, like, don't ask me for forgiveness.
No!
It means nothing to me.
Yeah, yeah,
I have nothing to give.
yeah. Both of these would get a no from me, dog. It deeply pains me to see you hurting like this. Well, good. You hurt my feelings too. Get out.
Yeah, I think that there's a shadow part of me that's like, good, I'm glad you're deeply pained. But
Yeah,
like my, higher self is like, that part really doesn't that's not what I need. What I need and want is for you to see that what you did or said hurts me.
yeah. There is no one I would be in any form of relationship with who would say either of these things. That's what I know.
That's good to know. So you won't have to deal with it.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Okay. There we go. Next one. It's more meaningful to me when someone says,
I've really messed up this time. We missed the deadline because of me. Or, can we back up and let me try to fix this? I really want to mend the damage I've caused.
ooh, there's something I like about both.
Hmm.
Um, But the first one, depending on how it's said and the what place it's coming from, like, is this coming from a really self-loathing place? Then I don't think that would feel good. If someone says, I really messed up this time, we missed the deadline because of me, like, that can come from a very just factual place or a self-loathing place. If
Or a
it was just a
swirly
fact,
place.
or sorry, what?
Or a swirly place. Like a
Right.
chaotic place.
Right, yeah. So if it comes from like just this grounded, factual, simplicity kind of energy, I'm like, yeah, okay. I wouldn't mind hearing that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Can we back up and let me try to fix this? I really want to mend the damage that I've caused. In a way, I like the can we back up? Like, can we slow things down? Can we back up? Like, I like the idea of like, hey, can we pause and like redo? Because sometimes heat of the moment, whatever, right? And so if someone's able and willing to catch themselves and say, hey, let's try this again, I'm open to that. I like that. The let me try to fix this, that feels a little bit icky of like, it's all on this person to fix it. But this is just, again, semantics. I think the essence of it, I appreciate. And that I really want to mend the damage I've caused. Yeah, I don't think I have anything against that. I guess it sort of depends on the severity and the heaviness of the situation.
Yeah.
But I like the essence of I recognize I've caused some damage and I want to make amends.
Yeah. Now this one seems like it's focused around, like, I'm imagining we're in some work environment. There's a deadline that's mentioned. So again, the delivery would make tons of difference for me. And that is such a subjective measure. So like, mend the damage. If they're running around the office with papers flying around and they're trying to manage like practical damage versus recognizing again the impact on me, that would be an important distinction for me.
Well, what I'm sensing is, I'm curious about this, whether both of us are more drawn to apologies and repairs and amends when two people are more regulated, and have taken the time to sort of tend to themselves and their own fears and worries and shame.
Yeah.
To come back and be able to be pretty grounded to have these conversations instead of just in the heat of the moment, like spurting out stuff because you're afraid the connection is broken.
Totally. And again, the self-regulating piece and that being specifically described so that people really understand it is so important. I remember being in cognitive behavioral therapy for couples with my ex. And the assignment was, if there's a blowout, you go into separate places and you come back when you're feeling calm. And I ask you, at what point did we ever feel calm? I didn't even know what that meant. So we would go to our separate places and like, when we weren't actively enraged, we would come back together and very quickly become enraged again. There was no, just taking the time and space was really meaningless. To reflect, I'm just going to run through the stories in my mind and get worked up,
Yeah, this part is so important. Like, I just remember having arguments with my ex at 3 a.m. He's like, do we really need to do this at 3 a.m.? And I felt we really needed to do this at 3 a.m. And it reminds me of like how things have settled a little bit. We're not actively enraged, and also we're not very regulated yet. And that's what I'm excited about. Like when we do priming the body for peace, one of the big pieces I think we're going to put in there is understanding the nervous system, our nervous system. And when I talk to clients about this, we talk about really knowing the difference in how it feels when you are so regulated that you really have compassion and curiosity for another person. And you can really see their good intentions. And when you are maybe not as fiery, and also that if someone looked at you a certain way or said a certain word, you'd be right back in that fire.
Yeah.
right? And when you don't know the difference between those different states, and they're like fine nuances,
Mm-hmm.
what tends to happen is you tend to try to repair situations when you're not actually in the best regulated place to make that repair.
Yeah.
Because all it takes is a little remark,
Totally.
a tone that you don't enjoy, and all of a sudden you're back in, full on fight mode.
Yeah. So the unpacking of what's happening within us, what we've made things mean, what's been triggered up in us, what we're afraid of, all of those things can be diffused better when you're regulated. And I think a huge piece of work that needs to happen when you're regulated is examining your own thoughts and feelings and the meaning you've made, and to move some of that agitated energy out so that you're not bringing it back into the dynamic that you're trying to maintain this regulated repair state with a partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's lots of practice, and it's possible.
Sure is.
So let me see. Go back to this to see what I would choose. I think I'm going to choose the second one. Okay. Next one. It's more meaningful to me when I hear someone say,
I am upset with myself over how I handled our disagreement. I cringe when I recall the way I acted. Oof, that's relatable. Or, I know that what I've been doing is not helpful. What would you like to see me change that would make this better for you? That's my Dr. Now Zeradin impression from my 600-pound life.
okay. I was wondering as you were reading, I'm like, are these people who she's impersonating?
Sometimes.
Okay. The first one makes me cringe.
Mhm.
It sort of gets into that, feels like for me, the shame place that someone is in. And now I feel more like I've got to help them feel better. And again, that's my old programming. Not everybody will see it that way. But I think for me, the second one, I know that what I've been doing is not helpful. I really like that part, the first part, that acknowledgement of like, this is not helpful.
Mm.
And this is actually language that I've tried to use with my boys since they were little, because I wanted to avoid the shaming and the feeling that you're a bad kid or not a bad kid. Because growing up, there's this Cantonese expression. If you translated it, it's like, now you're a good girl, and now you're a good boy, and now you're not,
Right.
And everything used, like, you use that gauge for everything. So did you finish all your dinner? Oh, now you're a good girl. You deserve to be loved. Like, that's
Right.
the actual thing, what people say.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, did you, go open the door for, grandma? Like, oh, now you're a good girl,
And you
right? You
deserve
deserve
to be
to.
loved.
Yes.
Jesus.
And so when I was talking, as the kids were growing up, I wanted a different way to help them see impact without it being a personal thing.
Mm.
And so, words that we used more often was that helpful, or was that kind, or was that necessary,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I do like, someone being able to say, oh, I know that what I've been doing hasn't been helpful or isn't helpful. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it takes ownership without all the shame.
Yeah. So for this one, I think it's highlighting how the context of the relationship really matters, and how
Mm,
well we know the other person. Not how
right.
well we think we know the other person or how deep our stories about the other person go, but how truly well and clearly we know the person. And the first one specifically, I can imagine our friend Kara saying. And I can imagine the tone she would be using, and I know what would have been happening for her leading up to it. So this would be like
Mm,
a significant, like, I cringe when I think about that,
mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
I'm really upset with myself, and I know that the next sentences would be something like, the repair would happen.
Right.
And I know that whatever it was would not happen again. You know, like it would have folded itself into her reality in a way that I know is meaningful for me.
Right. I like that just how you sort of explain that, because it makes me look back at it and reading it again. I'm upset with myself over how I handled our disagreement. I cringe when I recall the way I acted. Yeah, I think when you describe it that way, like if that's a preface
Mm.
for the rest of the repair, I'd be like, oh, okay.
Mm.
But if that's it, that doesn't feel sufficient for me.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
The second one, just to look at the second part of it. So it goes, I know that what I've been doing is not helpful. What would you like to see me change that would make this better for you? Again, like I think for this question lands differently than some of the earlier questions. But it's still like has a bit of the same feel. I would like someone to come up with maybe some things that they feel like they could have done differently.
Yeah.
And then asked for extra input.
Yeah. Yeah, my snarky bits if faced with this question would be like, well, I'd love for you to just change the past or your whole personality or something like that. You know?
I would say then that you may not be as regulated as would be helpful. And like the funny thing is, we are really giving our immediate responses, right? Like how it feels in the body based on our past experience. And it just goes to show you, like, that's probably not the best state and
Right.
most constructive state to be in when you're trying to have a repair with someone. And I think repairs need to be in a very intentional space,
Mm.
I think, where both people, maybe it won't always happen like this, but some of the bigger repairs, I really feel like they need to be set up, right? The space needs to be created for it to happen. And like for both people to come in, like asking themselves, am I regulated enough to be open to someone's attempt at repair? Am I open to seeing their good intentions?
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side, am I regulated enough to take ownership and also be in the space of someone's big feelings and maybe their disappointment with me?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not ready for those things, then that might not be the best time to try to have that repair. And like, if we could just be honest with each other, like, I'm not feeling open-hearted enough yet to see your good intentions and I want to be able to see them, or I'm not feeling sturdy enough in myself to be able to own the things that are hard for me to own or to be with your upset. And I do want to get to that place and I need a little bit more time.
And it is so hard to ask for time or take time when we're anxious or when the other person is anxious or when we just want to get to the goal of the repair being made. Like, I really want to
Yeah.
emphasize that repair requires something of us. It requires us to be in a certain state where we can actually connect with the other person through all of these things you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
We might have to hold their big feelings. We might have to
Yeah.
regulate in the moment and remember our purpose and intention and not
Yeah.
let anger or big feelings get in the way of that.
Yeah. And like, I think also, I feel like we're very blessed and we have also cultivated ourselves. Like, we've put effort into it and opened our hearts to allow it to happen. Like, I feel like if there were some really big repairs that needed to happen, and I felt like me and whoever I'm working on repair with don't have the capacity to like hold ourselves through that and regulate ourselves through that, like, we have people that we could call on who would happily support us through that
Mm.
and like help us stay regulated and connected to our hearts so that we could attempt a repair. And I think that's a beautiful thing to, like, you know, maybe two people need extra support in order to work through and create a repair.
Totally. Yeah, usually when we're looking for support, not you and I look for support in ways that we didn't in our previous segments of life. The ways that typically people look for support when they're in a conflict with their partner is they want to collude. They want somebody to collude with them, to tell them that they're right about everything they're thinking and feeling, which might be true, and that the other person is bad or wrong or crazy or stupid or whatever it is. Rarely are we actively asking for support, clearing out our assumptions and unnecessary negative feelings, and reminding each other to connect with love and trust, to really sink into that desire to connect and be clear with our partner, not just to make them admit they're wrong or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, this is like fun stuff to talk about. I like it.
Yeah, me too.
Let's see. It's more meaningful to me when I hear someone say, okay, yeah, we just did this one. So I got to choose which one is my thing. It's going to be the second one. Okay. Next one. It's more meaningful to me when someone tells me,
I know what I did was wrong. Or, I'm so sorry, I feel terrible that I let you down.
whew, I wonder if this one is a trickier one for me. I'm so sorry. I like both in different ways. I think the first one, I know that what I did was wrong, is more of my shadow self liking it, because my parents, I think, growing up would never admit they were wrong, and all I wanted was for them to admit that they were wrong.
Right.
I always felt like I was wrong, and so for someone else to be wrong for once, that feels good. So I think my appreciation for this comes from old childhood wounding. But there's an element that I do like about this, in that, wouldn't it be nice if we were in connection with people where both people felt it was okay to just say, I know what I did was wrong, and it's not a personal shameful thing. It's just like, yep, that just was not good.
Yeah, like whoops.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I like that about it.
I'd get pretty picky about this second one, especially if I was in a snit. I feel terrible that I let you down is, in my opinion, riddled with semantic problems. So you don't feel
Riddled with
terrible.
semantic problems.
Yeah, right?
I really like that sentence.
I feel terrible I let you down. Okay, so you don't feel terrible about what you did. You just feel terrible that I was let down. Something like that, you know?
Yeah. Like,
And a person can feel terrible over and over and over again, you know?
yes. Yeah, it's funny because neither one of these speaks about what someone's going to do about it.
Yeah.
But the second one does feel, for me too, like how you're describing. I feel less accountability in the second one. Right? I feel terrible that I let you down. Like, that does sound like a phrase that I would be worried I would hear repeatedly by someone.
Yeah.
All right. So for this one, I think I'm going to go with the first one. I know that what I did was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're repetitive. They're just shifting little bits now and switching options around and rephrasing things. Okay.
Yeah. It's more meaningful to me when someone asks me,
what changes could I put into place so that you might begin to trust me going forward? Or, am I out of voices? I hope. Back to Dr. Now Zeradin. Well, maybe a bit of British. I hope this won't permanently damage our working relationship. Will you please accept my apology?
no. I have it's such a strongly ingrained pattern in me. Like, all the ones that are about accepting an apology, like, no. And I'm even trying to look at this one through the lens of work, right? Because it talks about our working relationship. I'm just big on changes, like action,
Yeah.
moving forward. Like, yeah, I don't need us to cringe about the moment. I don't think me offering forgiveness is really going to change anything. I think different actions need to be taken from this point forward. So for
Mhm.
me, it's the first one.
Yeah. Yeah, these all, again, I'm still back, these all need to be combined for me. The second one, and maybe either it's because of the accent I chose or it inspired me to choose that accent. But it's akin, will you please keep it down? Will you please accept my apology? It feels very perfunctory and
Yes.
like there's expectations attached to it. And also, like, do you even like me or are you just worried about our working relationship? What are we doing here?
What are we doing here? Yeah. Well, it's funny. I'm laughing at you saying, "What are we doing here?" But it goes back to, I think, what I said earlier of I want to know intention,
Yeah,
right? Like if someone said, I really value our working relationship
yeah,
and I really want us to be able to feel confident in each other moving forward,
yeah,
that feels better for me.
yeah. That's funny because I have received a message explicitly that was, I really value our relationship in a
Mm-hmm.
context where like some intention would have been helpful. And that was
Mm-hmm.
the entirety of the message. There was nothing on either side of it or anywhere around it. It was just like, oh, I really value our relationship. I'm like, well, you can value our relationship and treat me like crap, that's also
Right.
possible. So like, and then,
Well, I think that's a really important part of this. And then what?
yeah.
All right. Um, what changes could I put into place? I like that this is taking ownership. I like that it's action oriented. Um, and it's future oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that, maybe there's some acknowledgement that trust was shaken or broken.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
My shadow antenna are rising up. And I could imagine, okay, what do I mean to get at here? There's an experience I've had in life of women who've been in painful relationships where trust maybe should never have been there and has certainly been broken. And they go into new relationships and they tell the new person every single thing that happened, every way their trust was broken. And one relationship in particular that I'm remembering a friend tell me about, she went from this awful relationship where everything turned out to be a lie. And she went into a new relationship where the guy was trying to make her feel better. And she was telling him all of this stuff. 10 years later, it blows up. And it turns out that he had taken all of that data and figured out how to lie to her in ways that she would still feel like he was trustworthy.
Mm,
So, this phrasing of what can I do so that you might begin to trust me going forward? I
yeah.
could imagine if I was in a certain very distrustful place that I might think that that phrasing was sus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't love the trust me going forward part,
Mm.
but I do like the first part.
Hmm.
Um, because like trust has so many different layers
Hmm.
exactly because of what you're saying. And
Because it's an inside job too,
yeah,
you know?
like I have to choose whether I'm going to trust you. It
Yeah,
really doesn't matter what you do or do not do. That's just what I'm going to observe and use as data.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
changes you could put into place. You could enroll me in an inner work program so that I can sort through all my stuff and learn to trust my own body. You could enroll me in Georgianna Steph's program, Priming the Body for Peace.
You're hilarious. Yeah. And it just sort of goes to show, like, someone could show up to that program, but if you're not really practicing the things,
Yeah.
like, is that enough to build trust? Like, I
Mm,
don't think that's enough.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. All
Okay.
right. So, well, the second one I find terrible, so
Yeah.
I'm going to choose the first one. Okay.
Yeah.
This is where we're going to pause until next week, and for now, Gigi will lead us through a closing practice.
So let's take a moment to connect in with your body. Maybe feel your butt on the chair or your feet on the ground. Maybe it's your hands touching something. I'm going to ask you to look at any object. It doesn't matter what it is. And once you see it, I want you to look for a new detail about this object that you haven't quite noticed before or you haven't really paid attention to. Right? I'm looking up because I see a little picture frame and I'm just looking at the little ridges that I never quite pay attention to. And I want you to look at that detail and feel your butt on the chair or your feet on the floor. And then we're going to turn and find another object. And we're going to look at this object and also look for a detail in this object that is new to you or something you don't usually spend much time looking at. And this time, if you can look at that detail and feel your hands touching whatever they're touching. And then I'm going to have you turn to behind you. And again, we're going to do the same thing, looking at an object and finding one detail that's new. This time, as you look, notice your breath. And then come back to sitting or being in a way that's comfy for you. Give yourself a moment to notice how that felt to do. Was it easy or was it hard? I really love this practice because it reminds us to look for the newness in what's familiar. And I think that's helpful not just in the things we see, but in the people who we know and the people who we love and the people who we spend time with. Are we willing to see what's new? Are we willing to see a piece that maybe we haven't seen before, even though they're always in front of us? So there's that.
Thanks, G, and thanks for joining us. Come back next week for a continuation of this episode, and as always, please like, follow, and subscribe, and if anything we've said here has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. See you next time.